I pause when I'm telling my recovery story because I made sure that things were in place so that I would experience the minimum amount of pain. But we also know that Black women aren't believed either because it's believed that we experience less pain than white women. And so therefore, we're not believed when we actually are in pain. So it's not lost on me that when I tell my story, that it could be a confirmation to some people that, see, Black women, they are tough. They're tougher and they don't need, and it's like, oh, no, I'm just an individual person. But that doesn't mean that we don't deserve care just as much as anybody else.
Erika, welcome to the Holistic OBGYN podcast. I've been waiting for this one. So welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
You guys, most of you are probably listening, but if you aren't aware, we now have a video version of every interview, most of the interviews on my website at Beloved Holistics, and you'll get to see Erika in the flesh. Erika just took off these big, beautiful hoop earrings. She showed up like ready to wow, and we had to take them off because they were making some mic noise. But if you don't know Erika Harper, go to Harper Erika 7 on Instagram, and you'll get to see who we're talking to. This is a very strong, very accomplished, very conscious woman. Like the way you show up in the world, I think is really where the magic is. So without me butchering all of your credentials, tell everybody, what is it that you do and how are you, what is this platform that you've built on social media and whatnot?
Well, I am a certified yoga instructor, and I am also a licensed mental health counselor, although I'm not currently practicing here in the state of Georgia, where I've moved fairly recently. I am doing a lot of postnatal coaching right now, and a lot of my background is in sex therapy and maternal depression. Actually, I've done a lot of work with maternal depression as well. So a lot of that informs my work as a coach and as a yogi.
Right on. Yeah. And hopefully people have gone to your page, but the first video that came up for me was you and I'm presuming your husband, is that right? Doing
Yes.
some aerial yoga and acro yoga, which I was introduced to in Los Angeles when we were there. And you are in like full splits. He's holding you up by his feet under it looks like your lumbar spine, sacrum area. He's holding one foot in one hand, and there's a toddler, your 2-year-old, I presume, crawling on his chest. And you guys are just this like force of nature there, just showing how loud and proud you are as parents. I just think it's so beautiful.
Thank you. That's one of my favorites too. So
it's pinned. It's clearly a favorite. Another photo that I saw of you on Instagram, which was actually one that I think I shared, and then I was like, I got to reach out to this woman. This is a beautiful photo. You're in full splits on your sits bones, and you're like 9 months pregnant. Can you talk about that photo?
Yeah. So what's so funny about that photo is that photo has gone around a lot. However, that photo almost didn't even make it on my page. I didn't like the way how intense my face looked.
Oh yeah.
And so I was like, you know what, I can soften this a little bit because a lot of times when I'm doing the postures, it's just my face of concentration, my concentration face.
Yeah, your game face.
And my game face. And and then I couldn't quite get it to look the way that it did, with that picture. And so I just said, you know what, whatever, it's fine. I'm just gonna go ahead and post it.
Yeah.
There you have it. Yeah. So, but it really was just me doing the stuff that I usually do. It was just me doing, that particular pose. I've done that hundreds of times. But when you do it with a belly, and
I was just gonna say,
it's a little bit of a different perception and something else comes across. So, and I didn't intend, to have a big message behind it, but I really, my intention was just to show people what the possibilities were.
Absolutely.
With the human body and especially with female bodies. So that was the main thing.
It's so important. What's up, everybody? It's Nathan, the host of your favorite podcast, the only OBGYN podcast that matters, the Holistic OBGYN podcast. So here's 3 things that you can do right now. Number 1, if you like these episodes, if you like the show, share it with people you love. They're probably going to like it too. The second is to support our sponsors. I've aligned myself with brands that make the best highest quality products out there, all pertaining to fertility, pregnancy, postpartum, parenting, you name it. Support them, let them know that you're paying attention. And then third is that I want you to take a moment and click like. Let the Googleverse and the interwebs know that you're listening, that you're paying attention to the Holistic OBGYN podcast. Believe it or not, this really matters. So it's so important that I'm just going to take a brief pause right now. I'm going to let you go and click that like button. So just don't mind me. I'm just going to wait. All right. You've done it? Perfect. Thank you so much. I think I've said enough. Let's get back to my conversation. As an OBGYN, I can't tell you how many times it was modeled for me that, hey, you're pregnant now. You need to take care of, you need to rest, and you can't do these movements. You can't do these rotation. You can't lift weights. You can't run. Like it's like you're just this delicate flower overnight, and now you can't do anything with your body. But your photos clearly demonstrate a different paradigm. I'm wondering how, since you started making your message as widely known as possible, I'm sure it's not even something you're like, hammering on the keys trying to figure out how to get more followers. People just gravitate towards this because they're desperately seeking permission to move and to enjoy their bodies in pregnancy. And clearly, I mean, that's at least the takeaway I get from your photos and videos of you doing these movements. So the advice out there is, hey, you're pregnant, you shouldn't exercise. I say baloney, you say baloney. What has been your experience in maybe being confronted by this cultural paradigm of, you got to rest and relax in pregnancy versus actually strengthening and getting to know your body better?
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to pushing boundaries. In general, I've always kind of been that way, and I never believe what the majority of people are saying about any particular thing, especially when it comes to women's bodies. I never quite believe it, and
Me neither.
back when, and so back when, I've always maintained that I wanted to have full autonomy over my body, even back as far as seventh grade. When I was first introduced to track and field.
Were you an athlete for most of your life?
Yeah. So started running track in seventh grade, all throughout high school, ran track in college, and then continued to still run to this day. The biggest stretch in time where I have not run is during my pregnancies. But up until that, I didn't go more than a few days at a time without running. So I've come to really respect and understand the power of my own body. And my desire has always been to master my own body. And so when it came time for us to conceive, I was hell bent on making sure that I knew everything that I needed to know to make sure that I was doing, number one, the right things for my baby, but also for me too. We happened to have our children later in life, so to speak. I was 37 when I got pregnant with my first. And so, of course, you know how society
geriatric
treats, yeah, of course, Jerry. Yeah, you know all the terms. You look in the system and you're
silly.
a geriatric patient, but it's like, okay, that's fine. But it's not fine. But that's a whole nother thing we can probably get to
We'll
later.
leave that fire burning for a little bit because we got other issues.
Oh gosh, I have a lot to say about that too.
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
Again, I just wanted to make sure that I was doing the things that I needed to do, because up until that time, I'd lived 37 years with just worrying about me and mastering me. And here I'm introducing this little baby, but it's like, I have so many things that I've done, and I still wanted to maintain that sense of self.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to lose, because oftentimes as a spectator, because obviously I had my babies later on. I was privileged enough to see other people having their babies earlier, and also the issues that maybe they presented from having babies younger, and not having a sense of self beforehand. And so I said, well, it's just easy enough, as long as you're mindful about the possibilities of doing that, and then also have a plan to make sure that you are maintaining your sense of self, but also understand that now you have a different hat, you have a different role. So I'm Erika first, but I'm also mom. And then I'm
Mm.
also wife, and I'm also all these other
Oh,
things.
there's so much
And
truth to
they
that.
don't, yeah, so you don't have to lose one. And it's tough kind of maintain that, but I really early on wanted to make sure that I kept those things in mind.
Would you say that pregnancy enhanced your relationship with your body, or did it force you to change your relationship with your body? The question that I'm really hoping to understand is, as men, we don't really go through the physical experience of change in pregnancy. But you, being
Yeah,
so in tune with your body, you now go through this tremendous thing. And a lot of women, I think, lament, I'm not going to be able to do the things that I used to be able to do, or I'm not going to have the strength that I used to have, or whatever. So they have embodied this new identity. And in some regards, it is going to change. I realize that. So it's not a fair question. But for somebody who's so in tune with their body, did pregnancy and getting to feel this thing growing, your body changing, did that actually help
yeah.
you augment your experience with your body, or did you hit a wall and you're like, oh my gosh, things are just going to have to be different now? That's kind of what I'm trying to get into your head and
I
your
got it.
experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was just different. I think that I had to. The one thing that I realized early on is that, and um, in my research about other people who had become pregnant, what happens with the pregnant body.
Mm,
Um, in doing that, there are things that you're just not going to be able to control. So I knew that to a certain extent, I had to alleviate a little bit of the control that I had wrenched over my body, and also just to embrace it. I think the biggest thing is realizing the purpose of you having your baby, and what's happening into
yeah.
you is something that's miraculous. I think that people don't realize, and don't, because it's so common to have a baby, to become pregnant, and all of these
Yeah.
things, and people just have babies left and right. But there's so many different mechanisms that need to happen in a timely manner, unbeknownst to us, in order for your baby to be born healthy.
Yeah.
And so, kind of going into it with this sense of almost revelry, where you're saying, I'm worried about this thing that's going to be happening to my body. I'm worried about, when really you're doing something and you're creating an entire person. And it's just something that is otherworldly. And I think that the respect for it was enough for me to just, let's just see where this goes.
Yeah.
As and
Yeah.
I felt that my purpose was to make sure that my body was as healthy as possible, so that I can continue doing what I do, and my baby can still be as healthy as they need it throughout the entire
That's
pregnancy.
amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much wisdom in what you just said, which is that I think a part of what people maybe get wrong, so to speak. I'm using air quotes if you're listening,
Mhm.
is that I can control every aspect of this. That's actually one way to maybe get the train off tracks. On the other hand, if you're completely dissociated from the process, then you become disconnected from the opportunity presented by pregnancy. And I'm speaking not as a person who's given birth, but from working with so many women who've
Of
experienced
course.
birth trauma, et cetera. And I know we're going to get into that. But when you can, instead of trying to control every aspect and versus completely dissociating, if you could find this middle path, the way of the Tao, so to speak, and you
Mhm.
can surrender to it. But in order to surrender and feel comfortable being carried by the waves, you've
Mm.
prepared your body, your mind, your emotions, even your spiritual connection to something greater than yourself from conception all the way through. It allows you to ride those waves in a really beautiful way. Even as a dad who's not going through the physical process, you have to prepare yourself, and then you can surrender and know that you're going to be okay on the other side. I don't know if any of that you wanted to comment on.
Yeah, no, that was absolutely beautiful. The whole thing about riding the wave, that's exactly it. And I think that even though you, as a father, don't necessarily go through what we go through physically, but you being there for your wife or
Yeah.
your partner, or anybody, anybody else, any other fathers out there who are going through it with their partner, um, yeah, you most definitely can feel that connection with your partner and what they're
Yeah.
going through. So
Yeah.
you have and also of course with your work,
Yeah.
that informs
Yeah.
your view on it as well, the beautiful view that you do have on it. But
Oh,
yeah,
thank
that
you.
no, I completely agree. That's definitely it. You just have to just let yourself go and just embrace the journey that it is, because it is a journey. You don't know kind of what's going to happen at the end, but the middle part, you have to stop and enjoy that stuff too.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it can't just be about you have to take care of you first. So most
Yeah.
definitely, I love that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that there's elements of this conversation that are, I mean, in all of my conversations, I try to make it clear that this is not just for the woman who's being going through this process. You as the man, yes, you're not going through the physical. That means the mental, emotional, and spiritual might even be more of a burden for you unless you dissociate completely. And then you're blindsided when you're a dad. And it's like, let's start working early on and I told you before we started recording that I'm doing a lot of coaching for men who are supporting their
Yeah,
partners
yeah.
because they've never been given a task that doesn't have an answer. It's holding space for this surrender that your partner is going to be
Mm-hmm.
going through. And when we can do that as men, for women who've prepared for this process, that's where the natural undisturbed birth, that's how that can take place. But it takes all this preparation up until now when you're sitting there in labor. Like, it doesn't start there. It starts way beforehand to prepare
Mm.
yourself on these levels. Real quickly, I wanted to ask about your husband and his role and how he kind of transformed through your births. But you said you didn't do as much running, but you probably did some running in pregnancy. Is that right?
Yes, I did early on. Hmm.
Okay, so running, yoga, and you're muscular. Were you doing any strength training or resistance
Yeah.
training?
Yeah,
Wow.
I
Okay.
definitely lifted
You're
during.
breaking all
Hmm.
the rules here, Erika. I love it. I love it. Let's break more rules together. Yeah, I think you're like I would point people to you and say, see, just see, like it's fine. You can do it. It's just going to require a little bit of body awareness and whatnot, which of course we can get into. But I think you've already kind of really elaborated on that, is you know your body so well and you knew how far to push yourself and how much weight to, maybe you adjust the weight a little bit. Maybe your hips aren't feeling great today, so you modify your movements. And for somebody who's a movement practitioner, a movement worker, that probably comes natural to you. There's a company that sponsors the show called BirthFit, and they do quite a bit of counseling around exercise before,
Mm.
during, and after pregnancy. And I think we need more programs like that. So of course, after this, we're going to point everybody towards your page, and hopefully they're inspired by some of the movement practices. I do want to ask about your husband. Tell me about his journey. I mean, if you could sum it up for him, since he's not here to speak to it, what was his experience like from what you learned from this person that you love so much, going through this transformation?
Well, Aaron has always wanted to be a father. He, as far back as he could remember, he'll tell you that himself. So nothing here is anything that I'm volunteering.
Yeah,
He loves the idea. He loved the idea of being a father,
yeah.
and so he was very excited. We both decided together that okay, it's time, um, and so during pregnancy he took on a role of just being just absolutely supportive, and that's the way his personality is. He's a very accommodating personality. I have a very strong personality. and and so I'm very assertive. Sometimes I'm loud. I have
You and me are the
opinions.
same. My wife and Aaron are the same. They could go and have lunch,
See,
and you and I will go like
see,
conquer the world.
and talk for hours. You and
Yeah,
I,
yeah, exactly.
But yeah, he's very personable as well. But he really was just he looked he it was beautiful being the partner of someone who was so appreciative of
Mm,
a pregnant body. You know what I mean? And
mm,
not and just in a way that was in awe.
yeah,
So I'm already in awe
reverence.
because look at my belly, every day. You're just look, there's something different. Every
Yeah,
day was excitement because it's just like, oh, this weird thing is happening, because I'm not attached to any of
sure.
the maybe the aesthetic stuff that would be kind of off-putting to some people.
Yeah,
Um, And he was the same way. We both were just kind of looking at this whole process as if, ooh, what's going to happen next? From a very almost anthropological type of perspective. It's
A
like,
young
wow.
female in her natural environment is developing
Exactly.
a fetus, and she is incubating the fetus. Yeah.
That's exactly it. It was all like a big experience. This is something new, and there was the recognition that this is an experience that's never going to happen again.
Yeah.
I'm never going to have a first baby ever again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even and if I have subsequent babies, this is while I was pregnant with my first, if I have subsequent babies, and then that's going to be a brand new experience. I'm always going to be a new mom every
Yeah.
day. Going forward, I'm going to be a new mom, and I'm
Yeah.
going to be discovering this. These kids have never existed before. We have never existed before with the development, the personal development that we have. I mean, so it's just where every day is just days get frustrating. Anyways,
Yeah.
you were asking me about Aaron. But
Well, no, but
Aaron,
this is a part of it. I mean, men, when we're watching our women,
yeah,
the women in our lives grow a baby, that's your baby, and they're
yeah,
nurturing this baby, and their body's changing, and it's becoming even curvier. My wife is like a curvy lady, and I can't imagine how many times I said "wow" looking at her like naked, getting dressed. It was like wow, but it wasn't just that she's beautiful, which she's a drop dead gorgeous woman. It was you're growing our baby. You're so beautiful. This is beautiful. Like
right,
that's a part of it. Like what an amazing experience to go through as a man who loves a woman. Or
yes.
I mean, yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, I got so
No, no,
excited.
no. You're exactly right. We're on the same page there, and I think that is. I don't know how old you were when you had your first, but I know that age and maturity for us played a big factor. I
Yeah,
think that if we were to have had conceived early on, there's so much stuff going on because in your 20s, you're still trying to figure stuff out. Who
yeah,
are you in your 20s? I don't know, and so to a certain degree, I still don't know,
yeah,
and so
yeah.
when you're in your 20s, you don't really have I was able to call on so many different tools in order for me to get to the point where I was so appreciative of every moment. And I
Mm,
know for a fact that I would not have appreciated the moments like that with the personal development that I had in my 20s.
yeah,
So,
yeah. We were
this is a luxury.
36. No, 30, 35 with our first, and we
Okay.
just had our second at 37, 36, 37, something like that. So roughly the same age as you guys.
Yeah. See,
Yeah.
so yeah, there's just something about and to a certain degree, I think that's why certain people with that in economy stuff, I think that that's what a lot of people are doing. They know, okay, I have to find out who I am first, and then
100%.
they're having
Before
the
you
babies a
change
little
and
bit
become
later.
somebody new.
Right. Yeah. Before I add
Yeah.
on this extra hat, who am I here and now?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's big. So, most definitely.
Yeah, you definitely have things dialed in a way that I think a lot of women. I don't think that there's a right way to do this. I want everybody to listen. I don't think that Erica has it all figured out. Certainly, I don't. But when you know who you are, the experience doesn't. The experience just unfolds. Whereas if
Yeah.
you aren't sure of who you are, the experience happens to you. And I think that a you know you there's an important difference there, and I do think that somebody in their 20s could have that experience, but as older people who were definitely like we knew who we are. We've been together since we were 16, but we took a big long period of separation when I went to medical school and dated other people, and the universe brought us back together. Having gone through all of those tribulations as a unit not only made us extremely fertile and intimate, but also ready and understanding where one another needs a little support in these ways that actually made it a very beautiful process. We had amazing pregnancies and childbirth, so there is something to it for sure.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That's a
Yeah,
great story.
yeah, yeah. I've told my story before, and I'm very proud of our little journey together, my wife and I.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're more appreciative of each other
Yeah,
after, absence makes the heart grow fonder and
yeah.
things like that.
It's like the Notebook. That's our
Y-
story. Is Nicholas Sparks, the
Yeah.
Notebook. As a yogi, self-described yogi, meditation, whether that is sitting and humming om, or it's doing a type of breath work, or it's really just getting into a pose and leaning into it, surrendering to the tension. there's a deep meditative practice that comes with many people's, yoga practices. I'm wondering, I probably can guess that you have some sort of relationship with meditation, but how did the awareness of your breath and awareness of uh, being able to observe the observer, so to speak, through meditation, how did that help you through the actual, maybe the pregnancy, but also the birth itself of your kids?
Both of my kids were born C-section, and that's something that we can
No
talk about,
kidding. Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
And the story behind that. I had a myomectomy. I had fibroids removed.
Oh, gotcha.
Um, there's definitely a story there that I definitely don't mind sharing.
Yeah.
Um, but so I didn't have a natural birth, um, but the pregnancy itself, of how I used my meditative work, was mostly through my yoga and also my desire to keep stress at bay. Um,
Mm,
the one thing that I've learned a lot about, and I've been doing a lot of research on, is the effects of stress on the body in general, but in particular, pregnant bodies, and the effects that it has in the onset of disease. And so I have been doing, prior to that, I had been working on making sure that I was able to bring the heart rate down and all
mm.
of the different ujjayi breaths and all of that throughout the pregnancy, throughout the when I'm on the mat.
Can you
I
demonstrate an
already
ujjayi breath? Because in case people don't know, can you just lead us through one or two of those?
Yeah, so it's imagine that you are fogging up a glass,
Okay.
and the sound that you make and where the breath comes from. You're constricting the back of your throat, and all
Okay.
you have to do is close your mouth. So you sound a little bit like Darth Vader. If
Yeah.
you if you sound like that, you're doing it the right way.
Got it.
Uh,
Got it.
but it's an integral breath to most yoga practices. And so it's the breath that you use when you're going through your different movements, and you're trying to hold a pose, or you're breathing through when they tell you to breathe through a pose. You're going to be using your ujjayi breath.
Amazing.
But
Okay.
but make I was always, and I hate to keep saying this, but I've kind of always been connected to breath in general, because to run, you have to make sure that you have a breathing pattern. And so it wasn't very much of a departure for me when I found yoga, for me to then, okay, you need breath. If you want to balance, if you're stumbling in a pose, if you're struggling to hold a pose, or if, you're struggling to extend anything. Um, as long as you are, have capability, or you're
Yeah.
capable of doing
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
using your breath to steady yourself, to calm yourself, to bring down your heart rate, to control the wildness almost that's happening within you, can be so effective on, again, calming that parasympathetic system, that whole thing, and making sure that you are nice and calm. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that during that time that I was stress free, and also that I wasn't doing anything that could bring the onset of certain stress related issues
Mm.
with my pregnancy. So I there wasn't a day that went by that I did not do yoga,
Yeah.
because I almost felt that it was prescriptive for me,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make sure that this thing, it wasn't anything hard. It wasn't as if I felt like I had to do it. I really desired that connection with myself, and making sure that you're putting, pointing your mudra at your baby belly, in semblance of, as a symbol of making, honoring the life that you're growing in you as well while
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
practicing. So yeah, I mean, I meditative work was again integral to everything that I did during my pregnancy.
Yeah. When you were giving birth, granted, when we say giving birth, of course, I think people presume that you're pushing a baby out, but you're
Yeah.
in some regards, a C-section is even harder because you have a
Yeah.
sheet a couple centimeters from your face. You're strapped down still in many hospitals, crucifixion style. Not every hospital, may not have been in your experience, but and then you're anesthetized, which is not the same as analgesia. Anesthetized is you cannot feel your body. It's
Right.
not blocking the pain signal back. So you have somebody operating, they're talking about their kids' soccer games. You've got a sheet right here. Aaron's sitting to your left. Anesthesiologist is doing all kinds of weird stuff that anesthesiologists know how to do. And thank you for them because they keep you from having pain and a even more traumatic experience. But in that environment, did you find yourself getting anxious? And were you able to use your breath to calm it down? Is this an application of breath work, do you think?
Definitely. Yeah. 100%. I knew from the very beginning that I would be having a C-section, and so I was prepared for it. And that's actually one of the reasons that I wanted to maintain my practice, maintain my fitness level, because one of the things that my doctor and I had my babies at Cleveland Clinic,
Oh, wow.
and
Up in
Cleveland
Ohio.
Clinic does, yeah, yeah. So I don't, and from what I hear, Cleveland, other people other mothers that I know have had really good experiences at Cleveland Clinic as well. But my doctor was despite the fact that I was having a C-section, I wasn't going to be able to have my home birth like I always dreamed that I would. But he was very, very open about answering my questions. And one of the things that he told me very early on in when I was kind of running down a list of questions that I had for him as far as what I could and could not do. He said that, you know what, it's great that you want to maintain your fitness level to a certain degree as you go along, because it's going to help you in your recovery as well.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that not a lot of people, and it's not, and we're talking about fitness, not being skinny, not
Right.
the
Right.
aesthetic stuff that people think of when somebody says, hey, you should be fit. We're just talking about having a certain degree of cardiovascular health, lifting weights every once in a while. It doesn't have to be huge weights, and just keep moving. And you can do those things during pregnancy. And the biggest thing that he told me too was that um, you are able to do if you whatever you're able to do beforehand, you're able to do after. And so, but you just have to be smart, make sure that you're not doing anything to hurt yourself. And so that's it. So if you feel pain, don't do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Yeah. There's where the body awareness comes in. If it hurts, you're not
Yeah,
doing it right. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Just
Yeah.
don't do it. Stay away from that. And
Yeah.
so I would run, and um up to a certain point, and then I started getting okay, this feels weird. So
That
I
round
wouldn't
ligament
run.
pain, the depth of the
Round ligament
baby's
pain,
head in the
exactly.
pelvis. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the only thing that I really could do all the time, no matter what, was my yoga practice.
Mm. Mm.
And it didn't have to be all day. I can do a 10-minute session. I can do a 15-minute session. I can do, sometimes I could do an hour session. But, the biggest thing is just being smart and listening to your body. So, and to go back to your question about the C sections, me going into that, I was I'm never been excited about surgery.
Mm.
I've been, as I said, I've kind of been working on making sure that I knew my body as best I could, and being as healthy as I possibly could, basically my
Yeah.
whole entire life. And so I had already had the myomectomy. I had two myomectomies actually, and which I wasn't happy about. But I had those surgeries, and so the biggest thing was making sure that I knew the ins and out, what was going to happen, so that I wasn't surprised.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times you go into it and you just don't know. You're
Yeah.
there and you're anxious because you just don't know what's about to happen. Things are happening to you. No one's telling you
Yeah.
what's going on. And I just had a problem with that. And so my doctor again was very good about, hey, okay, we're going to take you in, this is what we're going to do. And I had already done the research myself too, so it wasn't as if it was brand new. But he then ushered me into it and said, hey, this is what we're going to do. Okay, he can sit here and blah 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 and all this stuff. It was a very it was as it was as I don't want to say it, not wholesome is not the word I'm looking for, but it was as good of and as
Inviting, maybe? Like you felt
maybe,
like
yeah,
invited in and we're going to take care of
considering.
you. Considering. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like considering that it was, the bright lights. It wasn't the calming experience that you would think that, that a home birth may have. It was as calm
Yeah.
as it could possibly be considering the circumstances.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But you had mentioned the whole thing. Yes. So they had me, with the arms out and everything. And it was just like, okay, I already knew that was going to happen. It's fine, and Aaron was able to look over and see um, both of my babies as they came out, and they gave the babies to me, and but I was really out of it. And
Yeah.
that kind of was a little off-putting. I didn't realize that I was going to be out of it to that degree,
Mm.
but I understood that
Kind of
that was
like
part of it.
not just sort of like not there, like kind of foggy and
And I
unaware of your
could
surroundings.
see, yeah, I could see my baby. I saw when the baby came. I saw, everything, but I just couldn't, you were just so tired,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and so I just felt myself just nodding,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and barely making sense,
Yeah.
and so Aaron's just kind of in my ear. Oh, he's so beautiful. She's so beautiful, and I'm like, oh, great, and
Sounds good.
not, but he, and this is key too. My husband was very, very, he took my place in that respect. So
Mm.
I trusted him 100% to be, if I was out of it, that he would take my baby. And from that point on, we were not separated. My babies did not go to the nursery, and not, saying that anybody who has placed their baby in the nursery, there's anything wrong with that. This is just my story, so I want to make sure
Sure.
that's clear. But my wishes, my personal wishes, were that my baby remains by me at all times.
Yeah.
And if they were not to be by me in my sight, they will be within my husband's.
Yeah. With Aaron.
Yeah, they will be with him. So yeah, so
Thank you.
considering the circumstances, I think that my experience was as beautiful as it could have possibly been.
Erika, thank you for sharing that. That was a birth story, everybody. That's what a birth story sounds like. And every birth story is different. Every birth story is equally important. And even if it wasn't your dream birth, it is your birth. Erika, I feel like we've known each other for so long. I feel so comfortable. And I appreciate you sharing so much. You're obviously a sharer like me, but I'm glad I've been able to pull out little nuggets that I think people are going to be really, I don't know, grateful for somebody like you sharing. I do want to go back to the myomectomies because the next topic I want to consider is the postpartum recovery period and how you've utilized some of these lifestyle modifications to optimize your postpartum recovery. But you didn't just go through 2 surgeries with C-sections, which are sacred processes in and of themselves because we're combining this interventive surgery with the birth of a baby. You also had to recover from 2 myomectomies. And for those out there who don't know what a myomectomy is, we're talking about uterine fibroids, which are benign tumors that grow sometimes through the entire wall of the uterus. There's the inner lining, the outer lining, and then there's this wall of muscle. Some of these fibroids are so big, they can press on the bladder, they can compress the ureters, you can feel them sometimes in very large uteruses with fibroids. You can feel them through the abdomen itself. And unfortunately, I think that, I can't remember the stats exactly, but Black women tend to develop fibroids more than white women. So we have quite a number of Black women who are going through these myomectomy surgeries. And for you, it sounds like you had pretty extensive fibroids. They had to go in and pluck them out, and they generally will come back. But through the lens of Chinese medicine, these are congealed balls of phlegm, congealed phlegm. It's a gross word, but it's this benign thing. It's not cancer, and it can cause all sorts of disruptions in pregnancy. So it's good that you had the surgeries. However, it sounds like, did you have a big incision either up and down or across on your belly when you did it? Or was it laparoscopic?
No, yeah, they're very small, actually. I mean, you can
Okay.
actually see the most recent one in a lot of my pictures. I don't try to hide it. It's the
Yeah.
bikini line, but it's just a
Uh-huh.
little bit higher than the bikini line.
Sort of like this long, something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we call that a
Hmm.
mini laparotomy. So that's a major surgery, and they went
Yeah.
in and obviously they disrupted the wall of the uterus sufficiently that they said, hey, it's probably not a good idea to try a vaginal birth. And so you had to prepare now for your third surgery in probably a span of a couple years, which was your C-section. And then again, you had another C-section. So you've had 4 major surgeries. You've remained active, obviously, because guys, look at this woman's body on Instagram. She is dialed in. I'm wondering, what was the recovery like from the surgeries and especially after the birth of your baby? When did you get back to moving? How did you incorporate movement back in? How did you get through that?
So I had my first surgery to remove fibroids in 2007, well before I was ready to have children. And I was having some issues. My periods were long. It was just like, what's going
Heavy
on? I was
bleeding?
anemic. Yeah. And went in, and of course I'm healthy. I live healthy. I eat healthy. What's going on? And so I go in, and I hear that, okay, you have fibroids, and they may continue to grow if you don't, get them removed, or, you don't have to get them removed, but they were causing so many issues. I
Yeah.
just said, you know what? And, I don't want them to grow any further. I want to have kids. They said, well, they could grow back. And I said, yeah. I always think I'm exceptional when it comes to things. That's how I lead my life. Oh,
Not to
no,
me. No way,
no.
doc.
I'm going to get these removed, and I'm sure it'll be fine. And what was weird about the whole process of learning about fibroids at that point was that nobody kind of knew where they came from. And it's just like, oh, you don't know why. And I'm like, this is BS, like what, give me something so I
Yeah.
can solve this problem. I'm a fixer. And if something's going on in my body, I want to know about it. I want to know
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah.
doing, what kind of, again, behavior modifications I can do to prevent this from happening again. But I opted to go ahead and have it laparoscopically done.
Uh-huh.
And so they went in, made 3 incisions, one in my navel and 2 along the sides of my navel. And with the little robotic arm, went in and removed the fibroids piece by piece, because they were small enough to, um, they were small enough to do that, but they were very disruptive.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
my life. And so
Sure.
the recovery for that was not that bad because of the small incisions there. And so I was back up and running for, within I think it's like 4 weeks or
Yeah.
something like that. No,
Yeah.
no, I think it's less time for that type of surgery. It may be like 2 or 3
Laparoscopic, yeah,
weeks.
it could be like a couple weeks and you might be
Yeah, I
feeling pretty
think
good
that's what it
again.
was. It's been
Yeah.
a while,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was a short period of time, and I was up and going at that point. Um, and so there's that, and very short hospital stay. I think I was there for like a day. Now, fast forward to 2017. The previous year, my husband and I were attempting to become pregnant, and we just could not do it. It just wasn't happening, and we were like, "What the heck is going on?" So I actually blamed my husband initially. I'm like, you know what? We're always talking about the woman. It's the woman, but maybe
Let me
it's
see those
you. Maybe
sperms.
it's
Give me, give me those
yeah.
sperms. Let's
Maybe
take a
it's
look.
sperm. So he's like, you know what? Okay, it could be. I don't know. Nobody knows anything. So he goes in willingly to go and get his sperm analysis, and as it turns out, his sperm are like He-Man sperm. He
Ready to
has
go.
like yeah, he's fertile. He's good. And so I said, oh God. And then right around that same time, I started to get the symptoms again.
Oh,
Anemia,
yeah.
um, pain during sex. And the biggest thing was the pain during sex, because you could actually, the fibroid, come to find out the fibroid was pressing down into my, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Down into my almost like my vaginal cavity.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
So with
um,
penetration, he was banging against it and it was causing pain.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
That's one
yeah,
of the
yeah.
few reasons that fibroids actually cause pain, but it goes overlooked often because we say they don't cause pain. Well, they generally don't, but if they're right there and they're being banged on, yeah, yeah, definitely.
Exactly.
Very painful.
Exactly. And so, when I got, the results back of where the fibroids were, how big, my doctor then informed me that the one fibroid that was causing that particular problem was so big that it was actually blocking the entrance to my uterus almost.
Wow.
And he said, you have almost a 0% chance of getting pregnant with this big thing in the way. You have to get it removed. And in the years since I'd had my previous fibroid surgery, I'd read lots of things about shrinking fibroids and all of those things, but now we were ready.
Yeah.
And we were not only ready, but we had a very narrow window for when we wanted to conceive. So now I have another choice to make. And it's like, oh, God, okay. Now, what is this fibroid, removal surgery going to entail? Well, we can't do it laparoscopically because it's too big. We have to actually do an abdominal myomectomy. And so I go and, you and I are kindred spirits. I'm sure like somebody tells you something new, you're going to be on the computer. Like, what is this? Reading all different types of scientific journals. What are the statistics? I knew everything there was about that type of surgery. And at the end of the day, I cried about it because I didn't want another surgery. I'd already had another one and and this one was going to be more extensive. And I just said, you know what? Let's just go ahead and do it. My doctor assured me, I trusted enough in him and his skill level that he would be able to remove it. And, I still maintain my fertility. And so I opted for that. So again, it's one of those things where I wasn't really anxious about it because I kind of knew everything about it. I knew what the recovery was going to be. And I also prepared for it. So since I knew I was going into surgery, I do this every time that I have gone into surgery, which those have been the only times I've gone into surgery. Every single time I go on a workout regimen beforehand, and not necessarily because oh shoot, I want to make sure my fitness level.
Yeah.
I understand how how fitness can affect recovery. And so my idea is, I want to do what I need to in order to be able to heal properly. And so that's what I did. I just kind of, meditated on it and I just went ahead with it. As far as the recovery goes from the second one, it was a little bit more it was a little longer, because you do have the full, the incision there. But, it pretty much like they said, I was up and going within 6 weeks. I was out running again. But of course, making sure that, okay, I would feel pulling, I'm stopping because last thing I want to do is get a hernia. So it's really just
Yeah.
understanding your body. Your body's telling you no, sit your behind down.
Yeah.
Like, do what your body's telling you to do. It's in trust your intuition and don't push beyond your limits. Be smart about it. And so that's what I did. I just kind of focused on that. Okay, I'm ready. Nope, today not so much. And you just kind of have to go from there. You kind of have to take the good with the bad. Why I did not like being down. I don't like being in disconnection at any given point with my body. And the thing that was the most off-putting about the entire thing was the fact that I lost, and I've since gotten it back, but I lost the sensation
Mm.
around the area where I had my incision. I didn't like that at all
Oh, really? So
because
you did get some
it,
back, but it went totally numb for years. Wow.
yeah. So it
Wow.
just represented. Actually, it's all back.
Really?
it's for the most part, it's back. But for a couple of years there, yeah, it just it wasn't. And of course I kind of view that as a part of me that was kind of lost to this, the surgery. And I'm like, okay, I gotta. Hopefully it comes back, and then you just kind of forget about it. And one day you're like, oh yeah,
Sure.
I can
Sure.
kind of feel around it. So, um,
Yeah.
but other than that, everything else I was prepared for. And of course, I'm disappointed that I had to do it in that way. But
Hmm.
hey,
After you've gone through childbirth and you've had the C-sections, was the recovery from that different from your recovery from your surgeries?
yes, C-sections were easier
No
than my
kidding.
myomectomy. Yeah. Okay. So um, I just have this funny story, and I don't know if I want to tell it here. Whatever, I'm going to tell it. um,
I knew you would.
But yeah, but yeah, so I had my myomectomy. And as you know, anytime that you make an incision in your abdomen, you're disrupting the entire system down there.
Yeah.
Everything kind of seizes up in your intestines. And so I was horribly, horribly it was just the pain from gas and everything down there. And it was just painful, and I wasn't expecting that type of pain. And it was to the point where like my husband had to give me a suppository, and I'm just like, you know what, we are in it for life,
So the
honey, because
constipation thing was the biggest issue for you.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it took a minute for everything to get back,
Yeah, of
um,
course.
functioning the way it needed to. And, you know, it was an event when I was finally able to go. But I didn't have that level of pain in my recovery, surprisingly, from my cesarean sections. It's a
Interesting.
very strange thing, and I still quite you probably could shed light on that a little bit, why that was the
Well,
case.
there are a variety of techniques that can be used in C-section that actually minimize the pain dramatically. Now, the way I
Mm,
was trained to do it, most surgeons take the uterus out of the incision site and it helps you repair the opening of the uterus. And that's all good and fine, but then you put the uterus back in, and all of the tension that was put on all that connective tissue actually leads to quite a bit of postpartum pain, post-op pain. In addition, putting rough lap sponges into the abdomen to clear out blood and whatnot, it
mm,
abrades the peritoneal cavity. So there's a variety of techniques that actually are leading to worse pain after C-section. On the other hand, the extent of your myomectomy surgery was probably pretty extensive. I mean, they were plucking out, fibroids left and right, they had multiple incisions to close up. So you had a whole bunch of
yeah.
inflammatory sutures and all this inflammation in the uterus itself, which is already sensitive to pain. So I'm curious, when you had a C-section, did you take any opioids or anything afterwards, like pain medicine?
Yeah, I did. So I took them as I didn't take a whole lot. Um, so you know how they have you take medication you're able to take medication
Yeah, they
every
bring it in every
couple
4 to 6
hours or
hours.
whatever.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I did that the first day, uh, but the second day, because I was in the hospital for about 3 days, I think 3 days for both of my pregnancies. Yeah. And so the first couple days I did take the medication, but then I found that I didn't have to as much on the third, and I was actually very happy to not do
Yeah,
that.
of
I did.
course.
I don't want to, I want to, you kind of lose your sense of, okay, hey, this pain is telling me something. Of course
Yes.
I don't want to be in debilitating pain, of course, but you kind of I didn't want to be drugged to the fact, and I didn't find it necessary.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
How long after did you get back to your yoga, your weight training, your running after your C-section? Let's go to your most recent, because that was only 3 years ago, you said, right? Or 2 years ago?
Hmm. Yeah, 2 years ago, 2.5. Hmm.
Yeah. How long after were you able to get back to your sort of high intensity, maybe not high intensity, but were you able to start getting back into your exercise practices?
6 weeks.
Oh, dang. So you went right back to it. Good for you.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, of course I didn't just go full force either. I didn't
Yeah.
go out to the track and start sprinting, or put 100 and you know 35 pounds on my back.
Yeah.
Uh, but I did light yoga. I didn't do a lot of movements where I twisted my abdomen. Um, I stayed away from doing things like planks.
Hmm.
And to a certain degree, I still kind of do. I'm still a little squeamish about planks because my diastasis recti is finally getting it the healed as it needs to be.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, but 6 weeks I was back at it, just doing stuff.
Hmm.
And I would say that probably, I don't know, maybe like 3 or 4 weeks after that, I was back to kind of doing the normal things. So yeah,
Right on.
that's my
And
healing
you're
journey there.
clearly doing it now too. So you're back.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Eric, I want to shift a little bit. You're a black woman in a hospital system that is somewhat notoriously not doing a great job of caring for black women. I've got
Hmm.
a lot of black female friends who have told me that they have a very high level of anxiety when they're told they need to have this procedure. They don't maybe feel like they've been given enough information. It could be because of their race. It could also just be because our medical system doesn't do that great for anybody. But we also know that for sure in childbirth, there is a higher risk of something bad happening if you're black having a baby in the hospital.
Yeah.
And you didn't have the natural childbirth where you could say, hey, we're just going to be left alone and just let the baby come out. You had a lot of interventions, including, and certainly not least of which, is a C-section.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your experience there? And is this something that you are comfortable talking about? Let's kind of air out the laundry here. Like, why is it so bad? Why are so many black women struggling with this tension with the medical system?
Yeah. I mean, it's not, you can't really divorce my pregnancy journey from my blackness. It definitely was a key consideration in every step of the way in my fight for autonomy during the entire process. So yeah, I um, I made sure, and to a certain degree, I kind of sometimes pause when I'm telling my recovery story because because I made sure that things were in place so that I healed well and so that I would experience the minimum amount of pain. But we
Yeah.
also know that Black women aren't believed either because
Mm,
it's believed that we experience less pain than white
yeah.
women. And so
Yeah.
therefore, we're not believed when we actually are in pain. So it's not lost on me that when I tell my story, that it could be a confirmation to some people that, see, Black women, they are tough. They're tougher and they don't need, and it's like, oh no, I'm just an individual person.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that we don't deserve care as well, just as much as anybody else.
Yeah.
I may be an exception to that rule in this respect, just because of I have years of doing this whole thing with, fitness and yoga and everything. And so, I kind of make sure that I do share that part. So I'm glad that we're having this discussion right now. As far as my own experience with being a Black woman within the medical system, I went into it with the idea that I was going to, be telling people, making sure that everybody knew that this is what needed to happen
Yeah.
with my body, that I needed to be the person who, that I knew what was best, that I needed you guys to listen to me when I tell you something about something happening within my body. But I happened to be paired with a doctor. I didn't, well, wasn't paired with a doctor. I chose a doctor that I made sure that even from the time that I chose him, that he understood me. If he didn't understand me, because I actually chose another doctor previously, and it was just something we just didn't. I was like,
Just didn't have that
I don't
chemistry.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, over talking you when the doctors over talk you when you're trying to tell them something or they're trying to get you out quick. I'm like, you know what? I don't have to have a reason to not want to go
Right.
with you. I'm just going to not go with you. And that's all there is. And I think that a
Yeah.
lot of women don't follow their intuition with that. They just think, you're a doctor, you know best. No, 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 honey. If you are feeling a certain way about your doctor, if your doctor is just off putting and you can't put your finger on it, that is reason enough for
That's
you to
right.
walk away and go get another opinion.
That's right.
And that's what I did. I just went and I found this other doctor, and we had a whole discussion and about the whole Black, mortality rates in childbirth and pregnancy. And um, he understood where I was coming from. And because of that, and because I um, really advocated for myself very early on, and maybe partly because of his personality. Of course, maybe he would have presented this way without me having all of this intervention.
Mm.
But I did not have that experience in my birthing story,
Yeah.
where I felt as if I was being treated a certain way because of my Blackness. Now, this doesn't mean, again, this is one of those things, okay, I'm saying this, but I don't want that in any way to be a confirmation of, see, it doesn't happen. It didn't happen to her. And it's like, I heavily advocated for myself. And just by nature of me showing up the way that I did, could have kept away a lot of people from
Yeah.
acting on me in ways that would have affected, my treatment. And so people have to take that into account as well. But it does happen. It happens, and it doesn't necessarily have to happen to me in order for me to be an advocate for it,
Yeah.
because we all know the statistics. Or if you don't know,
Now you know.
it's out there. It's very,
Yeah.
very out. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
so my experience. My personal experience is I had a beautiful. The nurses were amazing there. Um, for it to be a C-section, it was, hey, this is, I got to eat as much pudding as I wanted.
That came out as pudding later, from what you
Yeah,
alluded to.
I mean, this is just jokes, but
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the point is, I didn't have a problem with anybody tending to my needs. If I felt like I was in pain, people made sure that I was, I had what I needed. When it came time for me to walk, they made sure that I had help. So it's like it's every step of the way I felt supported at the place that I gave birth. And I
Yeah.
know that's not everybody's story. And so, yeah, the advocacy really needs to happen very early on, if we want things to change,
Yeah.
because it's not going to change itself.
Yeah. Two things that I want to add to that is that, well, the first thing is a very, very close family member of mine who is also has a history in the healthcare professions. Also is like hashtag BLM, like they're a woke white person. They actually said to me something like, well, in my experience as nursing, black people have thicker skin, and they don't need as much pain medication. She's actually said that. So what you're describing is something that historically has sort of it has woven itself into the fabric of how we care for women of color. And this isn't just
Yeah.
black women. This is everybody but white women. And I think it's going to take a lot of time for that to change. So I appreciate you sharing. And even though it wasn't your experience, fortunately, that you had a bad experience with that, there are even people of celebrity status who've not been listened to, and then they have a big PE. I think it was it Serena Williams? Yeah, and of course we shouldn't need a celebrity of her status. And talk about a strong woman. I mean,
right.
That is an advocate. And if she asked over and over and over, I can't imagine somebody who's a little less like us and a little bit maybe more reserved and not wanting to bother the staff or whatever, that something catastrophic could happen because they weren't listening to them, despite this person who's experiencing these symptoms being so in touch with their body like you are. So I do think it's an important thing. I do think there's a lot more that we need to be doing. I don't think it's super easy to advocate for that within a system that doesn't even respect birth in and of itself in many regards. Not that was your experience, but having been an OBGYN in the hospital system, man, we've got so many fires that it's like, what fire do I need to attend to first? So if you're out there and you're listening, this is just another thing to have on your radar. I think it should be front burner. I don't think that we should have a whole giant cohort in our nation that's afraid to go to the hospital because they're afraid of being, disrespected or abused in some way. The other thing I wanted to say is that the advocacy piece is so important. I would also love it if women didn't have to go into the hospital with their dukes up to fight for the right to have a baby on their own terms. But you have both of these things that you manage to navigate so well. And I do think that there's something, some medicine to be taken from your story. And not that you have like the checklist item of, how to have a safe birth in the hospital, but there's a doctor actually in, I don't know, are you in the Atlanta area?
Yeah.
So do you know Dr. Brad Boots Taylor? Have you heard the name?
No, I have not heard the name.
He's a former like Green Beret. He's a black physician, also an MFM, which is the high risk OB docs. Like he
Mm,
is went to the top of the top and was working until recently in a hospital system within Atlanta. And he wrote a book called I probably have it here somewhere. I think it's called Shared Decision Making or something like that. It's a two volume series. But he sent me a copy of his first, and he goes through the B score, what he calls the B score, and this is basically some questions you can ask your healthcare professional to make sure that you guys align on some very, very basic values about your care.
mm,
And if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. That's okay. We can't expect this person to act differently based on their years of experience. You just have to find, like you did, somebody who really honors who you are, how you got here, and where you want to go. And when that chemistry works, I think all of these other issues actually dissolve away.
yeah.
But not everybody has the luxury of perhaps of selecting the right provider. We have to talk about in and out of network costs and all this other stuff. There's all these other barriers, but these are ideas that I think are relevant to explore. I just don't have a very easy answer. So I do appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, and I also want to add something too with regard to advocacy. It wasn't just me, because you have to make sure that if in the event that you're unable,
Yeah.
as a person, I'm unable to advocate for myself, you have to have strong people around you who are going to make sure that your wishes are kept. So my husband and I are very communicative about everything, and especially about what we wanted surrounding our birth of our children. And so I knew that, if I was not able to, he was also there as a sounding board, both a sounding board and also actually speaking to doctors as well, making sure that what we wanted was respected.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest thing, that another big thing that people have to take into consideration too, is that you can't, your village is so important, and especially with Black women and with
Yeah.
Black, maternal mortality being the way it is. And it does suck that you have to go in, with your fighting stance, but if you're going to do that, try to find or try to make sure that somebody else is there with you that's just as educated about you, about what you want, so that when you come up against opposition, then you can, present your case in a way that they can know, oh shoot, I'm not going to mess with this lady. Let's give her what she wants. And let's just make sure that her birth is the way that she would like it to be. So not only you being your own advocate, but having a village around you who also can
Absolutely.
help you out with that. Yeah.
It
Who you
takes a
can lean
village.
on for support. Yeah. Getting a surgery like that is very taxing on you
Oh gosh.
emotionally, and
Yeah.
even the strongest people, are going to waver sometimes, and you just need that person next to you who's going to be able to hold your hand and, keep things from being, you know, imposed on you.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and even the flood of oxytocin, the love hormone that comes through the body that goes to the baby that lets the milk down afterwards. This oxytocin hormone is not all that necessarily present during C-section, but gosh, you sure want to feel connected to your baby immediately afterwards. And if you're constantly in a state of flight, fight, freeze, those catecholamines are surging. You can't connect with the baby, so you need your village there to help you continue to feel safe and sound after the birth. And that is really where the village comes in. We are not, one man armies, one woman armies out here necessarily. Although I think a lot of people are compelled to take on that role. We really do benefit from having a collective of people that understand our wishes and our values. Yeah, that's really great advice, Erika. One last thing I wanted to chat about is through the lens of sex therapy. I'm sure that you've worked with women who've experienced some degree of trauma, and trauma is this buzzword right now. But I will argue that even an undisturbed, unmedicated, natural, healthy mom, healthy baby, vaginal birth, or whatever can be traumatizing if we don't integrate the process afterwards. If there's a high demand of stress on a person, if they don't feel seen, if they feel touched without consent, those can all be wrapped up in the body. And it takes a trained therapist to help unpack some of those things. And of course, sex trauma it comes in so many different flavors, but can you maybe talk a little bit about your work? I know you're not licensed right now as a sex therapist in the state of Georgia, but you bring this into your coaching practice in the postpartum period. What do you want people to know about this postpartum period and around this unintegrated stress, which I think is a really great way to frame trauma? What do you want them to know? What have you learned from working with clients in this space?
Well, I think that people really underestimate how, and you'd mentioned the oxytocin that's kind
Yeah,
of flooding you and things like that. But you really underestimate how much support that you need postpartum.
yeah,
Um, and so you have to be able to have someone in your corner.
mm,
And you also have to have a plan. So it's not just about, um, and I hate making it because it's such a beautiful experience. And then now we're into planning. But you have to make sure that you have a plan in place so that you are supported. Because a lot of times, then what happens is we go through this whole beautiful birthing process and everybody's all full of love and everything. And then once you get home, now it's back to a very patricentric way of thinking where it's like women do this and men do this.
yeah,
And so it's like, okay, women, you're raising the children and you're feeding the baby and you're doing all this. And, my mom, and you have, husbands or boyfriends or whomever going, well, my mom did that and my grandmother did that. And, this
right.
is just your role. And a lot of times women have, we have really taken that within us as well, where we think that, oh shoot, this is the way it's supposed to be. And you don't look around you're looking around at everyone else and everyone else is living the lie, where, okay,
Mm,
they're struggling. And I think that people really underestimate how hard it is when you come home with a newborn baby. Babies are notoriously selfish. You know what I mean? And
darn
for good
babies.
reason. Like they don't know anything. It's our job to impart things on them and to fill them with love and goodness and all of those things. And all the while, you're also healing.
Yeah,
Um, and so, but you're going to be losing sleep, so you're going to have to understand that, you're not going to be able to have a snapback body. Your body is going to, you're going to have the belly and you may have stretch marks. And, so there's all these things at play that women have to kind of juggle and perform in order to um, live up to the way a woman is supposed to be and live in our society, and the responsibilities that we have towards
yeah,
our man. And when are you going to be able to have sex again? And oh my gosh, how long has it been? It's like, I'm tired. I have not gotten any sleep. All I do is hear a child cry and you're thinking about sex. And so, and it's like, and maybe she wants to have sex too, but she's exhausted, so there's all these conversations that need to be had prior to about expectations and also about the realities of things,
yeah,
busting myths about what it means to come home, how you're going to be feeling. And this is not even before we get to postpartum depression and baby blues. But a lot of these things can really be alleviated if we were just to have the conversations and wholehearted conversations, right? Not ones rooted in patriarchy and misogyny,
absolutely.
where women have this role and men have this role. Um, I think that is the biggest reason that a lot of women get so just exhausted and so um, just out of it when it comes to coming home with their babies, is
Yeah,
not having the proper support after. um, so yeah, so I mean, so those are the biggest things, making sure that you have the people, the plan in place to make sure that to kind of stave off of these things. And
yeah,
again, these are very long conversations that you're having sometimes with both parties, the mother and the father, because a lot of times it's not as if the father or the partner is reacting in the way they are because of some sort of malice, right? It's just ingrained behavior. It's the way men are supposed to be. I thought
mm,
I thought that this was my role. And a lot of times you see in my work, I've seen where men do want to get involved, but they're just like, well, that's women's stuff. And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
no, you can do whatever you want to do. This is your life. You don't have to abide by any rules that don't serve you.
Yeah.
And giving them permission in that way is a really powerful thing, to be able to live within their house, within their four walls, the way they want to do it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a
What
lot of
about
restructuring of thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, what I always tell people is you have to consider birth. Let's consider the worst case scenario. Again, I'm using air quotes on my end. You are shedding the old you, a new you is emerging. Integrating that experience is a part of this new identity. You're now a mom, and you're going to be a mom again, or again and again and again. It doesn't matter. Every single time you are shedding the old and you're emerging new. I do think that that does lead to a lot of issues within relationships. I think it leads into a lot of this sort of like an identity crisis in a way.
Yeah.
I also know that it plays out in intimacy. Can you talk a little bit about intimacy after childbirth? And I think that that would be a really, really great place to wrap this up. I think you bring so much wisdom into this conversation. Let's spin out on that though for a second. What advice do you have for women about intimacy and their partners, re-engaging in this beautiful interplay after the birth of a baby?
The biggest thing that I tell people that they have to do is you have to, again, a lot of the conversations need to be had prior to baby being
Yeah.
born,
Yeah.
so that when the waters start to get a little bit rough, we can know exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we knew this was coming. We were prepared for this. And understanding, having the partners, both of them, because even women don't understand sometimes why they feel the way they do. I should want to have sex. I want to. I don't want him to go anywhere, and all these other things. But those are, so there's a lot to unpack. But the biggest part is making sure that they understand that how the body works, what it entails after, what happens to the body as the hormones are fluctuating wildly before they
Yeah.
kind of get back to even keel, and how that may affect your ability or your desire for intimacy. Having the man or the partner understand that it's not personal,
Yeah.
that
Oh, that's
the
probably such a
body.
big one. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge one, because it's just like, okay, well, what do you want me to do? And it's like, okay, well, no, honey, like you have to understand that this is happening. It's not that I
Yeah.
don't love you, but also understanding too that intimacy does not have to actually be sex.
Yeah.
And so there are other things that you can put in place while a woman's body is healing. And that may take a few weeks, a couple months, depending on if she's, having depressive kind of symptoms, it could take a couple months. But the most important thing is for you two to still have intimate moments. So
Yeah.
even going for walks, going out to the movies, having dinner together, just something simple, taking the baby to grandma's, or if you can, or even taking the baby out for a walk in the stroller while you guys talk.
Yeah.
So those are things that you can do to still maintain that sense of closeness, even if sex itself is not present, because at the end of the day, uh, sex is not the thing that's going to define your relationship. It's the intimacy that will.
That's right. Yeah.
So that's what you need to really cultivate during that time, and that's what I talk about the most.
Yeah, I think if you compare your 26-year-old self, you're horny as hell and you just want to fuck, like let's just go and just like tear each other's
Right.
clothes off. That's the whole thing you see in the movies, right? And
Hmm.
and TV shows at 36 or 37 or beyond. I'm just speaking from my own personal experience, and we're in the same age group.
Yeah.
Intimacy, it's different. It's different with children. It's not so much you're worried about the kids hearing you. That's not even a part of our story. It's that when you are just raring to go all the time, sex means something different now. And my wife has actually had to teach me this. Sex, and when we say the word sex, I know what we're talking about. We're talking about like we're having sex. There's a penis going in there. We're doing
Penetration.
it. Yeah.
Hmm.
My wife has actually had to help me understand that intimacy or sex is the consequence of intimacy. in other words, if we don't have that connection right now, there's no way that we can have sex, because sex is not just a matter of procreating, which is kind of how we were demonstrated that it goes in your mid-20s. It changes, but that actually doesn't mean it's worse. It actually becomes much deeper, the connection through intimacy. And then ultimately, if you have sex, great. If not, you were intimate all night long. And that serves you in a different way than when you were, just kind of doing it because it felt good and you had fun with it. Now you're a couple, you're a unit. And after you've had a baby, I think it is extra hard because we men, we take it personally. We have our insecurities kind of flare up and this and that. But gosh, foot rubs and neck rubs are like the thing in our household.
Man.
Like, what a way to connect with your person. And yes, we're not orgasming. I mean, we're connecting in such deeper ways, though, that sometimes it leads to that naturally. I won't share anymore, but we've had some recent experiences that are just like, that's not something we've done for a long time, but it all started with me being present, me listening, us just flowing in conversation and just holding hands at the dinner table. And it goes from there, as opposed to us being so focused on the outcome.
Yeah. And those are great things and great points that you bring up. And it's really important to do that. Really important to discover or rediscover your intimacy after you have your baby, because you don't really have, and to make sure that you're doing it in a way that is that almost like you have to plan it out, right? Because you may be up late, babies may
That's right.
be, babies are kind of always going to be the center of your world at a certain point. And so you have to make that time for your partner. You have to prioritize that intimacy, so that you can make sure that you can always tap into it.
Right. Yeah. Erika, thank you so much for sharing this. I'm so excited about this conversation. You've been so gracious with your time. I want to spend the final minute letting people know how they can find you. By the time this episode's out, maybe your new book will be available. Who knows? But tell everybody what you're working on, where they can find you.
Okay. I am on Instagram. My name is Harper or excuse me, that's my email address. Harper Erika 7. You can find
Erika
me there.
with a K. By the way,
Erika with
everybody.
a K. Harper.er. I keep saying dot. Harper Erika, Erika, the number 7 on Instagram. And I also have a weekly yoga class where we do movement and we do meditative work and we do breath work. And it's this whole little beautiful experience that you have with me for an hour. And then of course I do postpartum coaching as well. So, yep, there you have it.
Thank you so much. We'll send everybody your way. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate it.